What's going on? I want to welcome you from half court for today. I am Sean Murphy, joined as always by one of my favorite people on the planet. He is the Marquette Stallion, Troy Sergey. Troy, it's a pleasure to see you as always. How are you doing today? What is your mood after game one of the Indiana Fever versus the Connecticut Sun?
Yeah, I'm doing well, Sean. And I guess Mood wouldn't be doing too super well because they kind of got pounced by the Connecticut Sun there. But in all honesty, Sean, I kind of expected it, right? I mean, a lot of these girls, this is their first playoff game, period, in the whole WNBA.
Yep.
And the Connecticut Sun have looked good all year. They really play great team basketball.
One of
But
the
another
best
team,
defensive teams in WNBA. I believe they were the
absolutely,
best defensive
yeah.
team last year.
Right, right. They're locked down. And really, the Fever, their offensive end is really their game. So, they don't really have that strong defensive presence that I think you need to really compete hard in the playoffs. It'd be great if they're able to steal one game, game two. But I just think Connecticut is a really tough match. But another team that I'm excited about, I would not be good on the podcast if our podcast was called From Home Plate. But the Detroit Tigers are making some moves.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
Crawling up there for a playoff push. So shout out to them. Uh, it's going to be fun to see how the last couple of games go. So
Yeah, man. It's a really, really fun time to be a Detroit sports fan. You have the Tigers right now in their surge for the wild card with the chance to make the playoffs. You have the Lions being Super Bowl contenders in a lot of people's eyes. And you have two other young up and coming teams in the Red Wings and the Pistons that could potentially make some noise this year. So yeah, it's a good time to be a Detroit sports fan, especially after that decade plus uh real just what do you even call it? Just you didn't even have any success there. Like a purge?
a purge would be a good word to describe it,
I
Sean.
know there's an actual a 10-year lull. We'll just call it that. But not yep, 10-year lull. But nonetheless, it's a great time to be a Detroit sports fan. It's a great time to be a basketball fan because Troy, in a couple weeks time, we are already going to have NBA basketball on our televisions. Preseason is right around the corner and next week as of recording this is media day. I will actually be there to cover it, but before media day, before training camp, before all of that happens, I think it would be appropriate to talk about just our burning questions going into the training camp and into the season as a whole. So we each prepared three burning questions going into training camp about the Detroit Pistons. And we'll talk about that today and more. But first, this is From Half Court. Each and every week we talk all things Detroit basketball, NBA basketball, more WNBA basketball as time goes on as well, especially if the Detroit Shock ever come back, I promise you that might even get its own dedicated podcast. But that's a whole other thing. If you like this, be sure you like the video down below, subscribe to the channel, hit that mother notification bell so you don't miss any of the content we got going on. But also be sure you follow us on social media so you don't miss any of the coverage and conversations we are having. You can follow me at Sean Halfcourt. You can also follow Troy at Troy Sergey 44. He's not really very active on Twitter. But when he is on there and talks some basketball, I get some good laughs out of it. But Troy, it's time to talk some Pistons. I asked you to prepare three burning questions going into training camp. I also prepared three. Part of me wonders if it would be more courteous for me to go first and lead us off or to give you the chance to ask the first question. My gut tells me I should probably go first. Is that what you would like?
That would be fine, Sean.
All right. Sounds good. My first burning question going into training camp is a bit of a curveball. Is this the final roster going into training camp?
Yeah,
Because
right.
as you remember, Troy, a couple of years ago, right on the eve of training camp and media day, the Pistons made a trade for a Bojan Bogdanovic. We see all the time throughout the league that certain moves take place after that kind of what's considered that vacation or lull period in the NBA calendar. It's about like a month, pretty much all of August and after the free agency period. I think that this is the roster heading into training camp. this could, that could maybe lead into another question later. I don't know how long this will be their roster, but the odds are this is probably who they're going to have going in. What are your thoughts, Troy?
Yeah, yeah. I guess that, in my opinion, back in 2022 when the Pistons made that move for Bojan, I feel like that was kind of in some ways an anomaly. Doesn't really happen every single year where you make a move like that so close to training camp.
Mhm.
I would lean towards this is the roster just because I mean your question of I guess the next question would become who do you trade and who do you get, right? And I just think this roster has been constructed in a way where if you're going to make a big splash, you would have done it probably in July, maybe beginning of August. I
Yeah.
don't know. That's just kind of the vibes I've gotten, especially when you
Yeah.
made coach such a big coaching change, and you brought in a guy like Tobias Harris too. I feel like that would have been the season or the time of the off season. I feel like this is a different season of the off season, if that makes sense,
Mhm.
approaching training camp. So I'm kind of with you there.
Yeah, I think really the only time we've seen that massive of a team shifting trade happen that close to training camp was last season with the Damian Lillard trade to the Bucks and the
Yeah,
Drew
right.
Holiday
Yeah,
trade. And really the only reason why that happened was because of the strenuous holdout that the Trailblazers had because of the fact that they were essentially just backed into the corner with the Damian Lillard situation. So, to your point, I think most times, especially a young team like the Pistons, you kind of go into an off season with a plan of what you're looking to do and what you want your roster to look like day one. And if they were to make any trades, I don't think this is like again a team shattering, altering. Like I don't think they're moving one of the pieces of the young core. I think the most major name you could see get moved like before the season would probably be an Isaiah Stewart. And even then, you'd probably have to be getting a really good role player or role players in return to be able to, shape up the roster. I don't think that, especially since a game hasn't been played yet, I think this front office probably just wants to be able to get a chance to see these guys play basketball first.
right. I mean, that's a great assessment there.
Yeah. So, is that the roster? Most likely yes. How long that will be, I'm guessing will probably be something we talk about later. But Troy, I want to give you the floor. What is your first question? Burning
So
question going into
yeah,
training camp.
absolutely. Asar Thompson, we know what he's capable of doing. Asar Thompson, we've seen him on the defensive end, flashes of guarding other teams' best players. But a big question we had at the end of the year and into the offseason is what type of significant improvements will he make to that 3 point shot? To me, that's a very, very important question going into the year because I think in the modern day NBA, Sean, especially in that wing position, even that small forward position, which is a wing position, you got to be able to shoot that shot. You got to be able to shoot that 3 point shot. And with his talent, he's too talented to be lacking in that area, in my opinion. But we know that they got Coach Fred here in the offseason to help with shooting. And my burning question is I want to know how much of a significant leap he's taken this offseason in that part of his game.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how his shooting evolves as the season goes on as well. I think a lot of times we look at the shooting numbers coming out of training camp, but I think a lot of times it can also be like how does that shot evolve as the season goes on? And I mean, you can even look, last season with Asar, his shot, his shooting percentages were a lot better down the stretch, especially those games after the All-Star break than they were at the beginning of the season. But I think that that's definitely a big part of his game that, obviously I think his ceiling will be determined on how well he evolves in those types of areas. I think another area that we had discussed on the actually had Kuki on the pod like a month ago. He and I talked about like Sar Thompson and his handle, how important that is to his game as well. Specifically, with how good of a playmaker he is as he's driving down the lane. Just being able to keep control of the ball and to have that tightness so that he is someone that, you talk about who could be the secondary like playmaker on this team. Asar Thompson certainly fits that list.
Yeah.
So, I there's certainly still a lot of areas within his game that's raw. But Troy, what I think gives me so much faith in an Asar Thompson, or I've been so vocally, in support of him is, obviously we talk about the work ethic all the time. But the other thing that makes him special is how the things that he has instinctually that you just can't teach. Like, there's
Yes.
just certain, like, in the moment basketball IQ plays that Asar makes all the time where, quite frankly, for a rookie, he looked so much like a veteran. And
Right.
those are things like, yes, you can teach the guys the game of basketball, but those instincts and just that passion for learning the game, that you can't teach.
Right, and again, that's why you have to ask this question about the three-point shooting is because we know he's there in those areas, like, but with
Mhm.
a high IQ, with defensive intangibles. It's adding this part of his game, which is, again, a staple of the modern NBA, to all those things that you can't teach as a rookie. Again, his ceiling, in my opinion, gets higher even if you add
Yeah.
significant improvement to his three-point shooting.
And on top of that too, I think, not that Asar, didn't have, much space to operate last season. Teams definitely gave him more cushion as the season went on. But he's going to have more floor spacers around him now. So he's going to have guys, that you can see, that will give him more room to operate, and he won't have as much pressure. So if he is taking a three, it's not out of desperation to try to get the team back from down 15. It's hopefully a situation where it actually makes sense for him to shoot the three, because now you're going to have guys like Malik Beasley on the court that can take that shot. You're going to have guys like Tobias Harris. You would expect Cade Cunningham's 3-point shooting is going to continue to develop and get better. Like, there's Simone Fontecchio is another guy that you can rely to take that shot. So now, like, there's more players that can fit that bill. I think what I'll be interested to see as well is, obviously we talk about Fred Vinson and how great of a shooting coach he is, and just how much of an impact having him around will have. I'm interested to see how those veterans like a Tobias Harris and a Malik Beasley make an impact, because I think it's going to be really big for the players in this locker room to see veterans who are good and have been good for a while, and how they go about their business every day, because they haven't had much of that.
Right, right, yeah, it's going to be great to watch.
Yeah, for sure. So, my second burning question going into training camp, I mean, we've alluded to it a lot, like people, have asked a lot of like, what does the starting five look like? And I think for me, like, I kind of want to like boil it in a little bit more specifically. What is Isaiah Stewart's role on this team day one? Because, he's someone that, with his skill set, they've really thrown around a lot into the lineup. He's played a lot of 4, he's played a lot of the 5. In my personal opinion, I think Isaiah Stewart is probably at his best when he's a backup big at this current time, but at the same time, he showed enough, shooting wise, just to say that he can space the floor and he can do it pretty well. So, when you talk about the different possibilities and lineup combinations, I know in Cleveland, they had that 2 big lineup with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, but that's different because those guys are 2 elite rim protectors. Whereas, I think when we've seen Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart play together, there's been moments that have looked really good. There's moments that have not looked so good. And I think it's kind of like a thing where Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren both do better as rim protectors when they're in that anchor spot. And it's almost like they're kind of both battling to get in that spot when they're down low. So it's not really a dynamic that fits very well. So I'm interested to see if Isaiah Stewart comes off the bench day one. I know he's someone that's an anchor and a rock to this team. And I think if any player would, could care less about whether they're starting or not, it's him. But at the same light, I'm just interested because they also brought in Paul Reed. So is the thought, still to have them in that 4 position, in my opinion, with having Tobias Harris on the roster? I think that would be a mistake. But Troy, I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, yeah. I guess there's still a lot of question marks. I'm not sure if I'm fully ready to answer that fully because I don't know because there are so many scenarios. But I do know, like you mentioned, I do think certainly at that 4 spot, I think is definitely where he's most comfortable playing at. I certainly think, yeah, I don't
Well, I
know. I
think the
feel like,
5 spot, the 5 spot's where he's most comfortable playing.
yeah, I'm sorry, 5 spots, 5 spot. And I was gonna say too, like you said, coming off the bench, I think is kind of where I see where I lean towards his role moving forward. But I mean, hey, I think that's a good problem to have if
Mhm.
your 6th man or your 7th guy is Isaiah Stewart, because you're going to have high impact minutes. You're going to be able to stretch the floor a little bit, and you're going to play some good defense. So I think it's kind of a good question to ask because it's a good problem to have moving
Yep.
forward because we know that he's been a big staple to both sides of the court the past couple of years. And
Yep.
yeah, I guess I'm excited to see this new role. But again, like you said, it, as far as personally to him, he's going to give you his 100% best no matter what role or how many minutes he's getting a night. And that's a guy, in my opinion, I still want to keep around.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to give up for a second on Isaiah Stewart for those reasons.
Well, and we talk about like what are the like we talked about last year, like what was one of the biggest problems of the team last year? Those all bench lineups. They would just kill the Pistons every single time they went to it. And obviously, there was the whole thing about, not adjusting with the all bench lineups. But nonetheless, anytime they tried to go with a combination of multiple bench players on the court, their lead or their position in the game would completely plummet. And that's a lot of the reasons why, they just couldn't get back into games. So now, imagine being able to have an all bench lineup of Marcus Sasser, Malik Beasley, Simone Fontecchio, Paul Reed, Isaiah Stewart. That's doing a lot better than
Mm-hmm.
the lineups that they were throwing out last year.
Big
And
time.
that's not even throwing out the potential that Jaden Ivey could be in that all bench lineup. Asar Thompson very well could be in that all bench lineup. That's not even throwing in Ron Holland, who's one of their
Yeah,
rookies that they have going into this season as well. So, to me, I think like you said, it's like it's a great problem to have because that's really where they need dependability this season. It's like, you can have a great set of few young players that you believe in, but you need depth to build out that roster so you have stability on the court at all times.
that's right. That's right. And yeah, you mentioned that too. I don't have Ron Holland at all mentioned in my burning questions, but that is somewhat. If I had a fourth option, I'd probably ask him what's his role going to be with the team this year. Not that it really 100% matters as far as the trajectory of this team is dictated on Ron Holland's performance from day one. No, that's not at all what I'm saying. But you
Mhm.
do bring in a guy that we know is talented. We do know that he has a lot of upside. We do know he plays a position that certainly is a staple of this league. It'll be interesting to see. So
Let me raise you another question, Troy. Do you think there's a chance that Bobby Klintman could play more minutes this year than Ron Holland? Could this be
yeah,
could this be similar to the year when the Pistons drafted Austin Day and Jonas Jerebko, where one
yeah,
player might have a higher ceiling, but one player might be more ready day one? And not to
right,
say, like not to say Ron Holland is Austin Day, because obviously I'm not saying that they're gonna have the same trajectory, but that's what it was day one,
it was,
right? Like
yeah,
Austin Day was the swing, and Jonas Jerebko was kind of your safe bet. Bobby Clement has shown, especially in summer league, he looked really consistent. He looked ready day one. Did he look
right.
the most athletic in the world? No, but he looked like a guy that you could throw out onto an NBA court for 10 minutes a night and not feel like you have to vomit. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like,
right. Yeah, yeah. It's a fair question. No, I think that's a very fair question. Another year I think of, we didn't have a first round pick this year, but in 2018 with Bruce Brown, right? I mean, he played high
mhm.
impact minutes through the whole season. And yeah, he was just a second round steal. So I think another question you could add to that is, do you think Bobby is a second round steal? And I think there's a lot of potential there. Absolutely.
I mean, anytime you can get a rotation player in the second round, you almost have to say it's a steal. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
if he gets to that point where he is a dependable rotation player, without a doubt. But I think we can kind of morph that question less of who's going to play more, but what will their roles look like? Will their roles be significant? I think honestly, with just I would just say quickly, and we can move on to your next question. But I would just say with those guys, I don't think they would feel worried at all if they had to spend some time with the Motor City Cruise. I don't
Yeah. No,
think
no, not at all. Yeah.
I think the whole point with what they're trying to do this year and going forward is to put less pressure on their young players and to put them in a situation to foster and grow. Because we've seen what it looks like when players'
Yeah.
confidence gets shattered.
We
So,
could we could have a whole podcast dedicated to rookies who've had to overextend themselves and play way more minutes and have a bigger role than they ever should have as a rookie. I think of even
yep.
a guy like Brandon Knight, right? KCP, all these guys had, I thought, bigger roles than they should have as a rookie, which unfortunately kind of led to, in some ways, their downfall. Not that KCP had a bad NBA career or is having a bad NBA career, but it's different to be able to ease into a team and a rotation versus be expected to play 30 minutes a night.
Right. It's kinda it's, I would say this position is harder, but it's kinda similar to, like throwing someone in, like you get a first overall pick, like the Carolina Panthers, like throwing in Bryce Young day 1 and just, "All right, go do everything." It's different when you have a guy like that than say like a Patrick Mahomes where it's like, "Hey, just sit here, chill out, and when you're ready, we'll just throw you right in." But, not saying he's gonna be Patrick Mahomes, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Nonetheless, I think
right.
it's good that they're going to be in a situation where they won't be so heavily relied upon day 1 because there is that depth of talent on the roster. Troy, what's your next question?
Yes, I have it's a kind of a part one and a part two question. Part one's going to be simple, yes or no, and
Cheating, but I respect it.
part two is going what we're going to be actually just fleshing out. So, yes or no, will there be noticeable improvements on the defensive end with Coach JB Bickerstaff running the show now? I would hope the obvious answer to that is yes. And then the part two is, in what ways will Pistons fans be able to notice those changes? Right. I do think, as a fan, the fan in me, right, I want to see noticeable changes. And I want to be able to watch a game and say, hey, what I'm watching right now under this coaching leadership, how is that different than last season? Sean,
Mhm.
love to see how you would answer that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that you almost have to track, right, is, it almost starts with, with defense, there's the numbers and there's the eye test. And I think with this team, it's gonna be interesting to track the numbers of where this defense ranks, you know, not like just throughout the season, right? I think if this team were to become a top 20, even, close to top 15 defense this season, I think that would be a massive success. And, I think when you talk about, like, what that would look like, I think some of the big things, that this team really struggled with is team defense. I think a lot of guys were good individually on their assignments, but there was a lot of, moments with lapsed communication, guys looking at each other like, "What just happened?" So, I think a lot of that is experience. I think a lot of that is also coaching. You bring in a JB Bickerstaff who, comes from, teams like Memphis, teams, like Cleveland, where, they are grit and grind, focused on, on the defensive side of the ball. He's someone who knows exactly what that looks like. And, I think if we are indeed seeing this team turning the corner and being the Pistons, basketball that we've talked about wanting to see, and they've said this themselves, it starts on the defensive side of the floor. So, in my opinion, if you're going to find moments where you go, okay, that's that's Pistons basketball. As fun as, the offensive side is, as fun as the dunks are, the alley oops, the threes, those have to it has to start on the defensive side of the ball.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I also think you look at the moves that they made this offseason to, to really bolster that side of the ball. I think the biggest, really the biggest thing, just to not keep hammering this home, but, we talk about the wings, but to me, it's the big rotation, Troy,
Yeah.
specifically having, guys at all times that you can rely on to protect the rim. Jalen Duren, if he improves on that side of the ball, we know what his potential is. And, you would think another year in the league, he's only going to be better. At least he has to be. Isaiah Stewart, if he is in that position to be a backup big, is really in a position to thrive. But how about Paul Reed? Another really dependable rim protector that is someone that you can rely on as well. With all due respect to James Wiseman and Marvin Bagley, Isaiah Stewart and Paul Reed are better rim protectors than Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman. I don't think I'm saying a hot take here. So you look at the fact that their back end is bolstered. They got more athletic with their wings and the talent that they brought in. They got older, so they got wiser. I think, there's no reason this team shouldn't improve on that side of the ball. And again, if we're talking about this season being a success, it has to start on the defensive
Yeah.
side.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would answer it pretty similarly. I just think, yeah, those bigs are going to be really important. You mentioned them, and that kind of goes into my third question, but I don't want to get there just yet because I want you
If
to
it
have your third
transitions
question.
well, go right on ahead. This is a
Are you
podcast.
sure?
I Troy,
Okay.
I make the rules. I am okay with it.
Yes. Well, I'll have to ask it. There's a couple of question marks I have with Jalen Duren going into the year, and my question is going to be, what jumps has Jalen Duren made in his game in year three? And I'm looking at two different jumps: offensive improvements, and the most important, defensive improvements. And I would like to say that there's going to be improvements in both. I would like to say he's able to even have a greater touch around the rim like he even had last year, able to score the ball. We know that he can, certainly grab a lot of those alley oops and bring them home for us in the dunk category, as far as I'm talking about scoring on the offensive end. But the defensive end, Sean, a guy like Jalen Duren, with his physicality, with his skill set, he has to be able to play both sides, especially with him being a major pillar moving forward. I feel like we're putting a lot of eggs in the Jalen Duren basket, and rightfully so. But he has to deliver on that defensive end. So, in what ways am I going to be able to, as a Pistons fan, turn on the TV and see those defensive improvements? That's a burning question, Sean. I really want to see that
Yeah.
happen this year.
Yeah, for sure. And I would raise that and say, if there is one question that that I could ask right now at media day and
Yeah,
ensure that I get an answer, it would be to Jalen Duren, and it would be, what did you work on this summer?
yeah,
What was the plan that the front office gave you? How did you go about the summer? What has been your focus? Because, he really is, I don't think it can be stated enough. He really is an X factor of this team's ceiling because he is such a real potential all-time great big, just with his stature, with his
yeah.
athleticism, the skills that he has.
That's why
I
you
just
have to ask the question. Right, right. Go
Right.
on.
Yep.
Yeah,
No, absolutely. And this is a guy who is, 21 years old and has already played 128 games in the NBA, has shown a lot of flashes, but just like with any young player, there's been a lot of good and there's been a lot of bad. And so when I think about, what are ways that you'll be able to tangibly tell, like on the defensive side of the ball that he's improving. I think the first thing that you want to see is the improvement in terms of foul trouble. Obviously you're going to have that to some extent with young bigs, especially guys like Jalen Duren who play physical. There's going to be nights where he's going to get two fouls quickly. That's just going to happen. If he can cut that, if he can really, cut that down and still be able to like affect players' shots at the rim, but do so in a disciplined manner that is with the rules, then that's something where you're really going to see a lot of growth. Because the first thing is being able to stay on the court is really a big first step. I think the other thing, I'm going to be interested, just and I want to follow these stats more this season is just the analytics of the shooting percentages around the rim, and as well, I think another area you really see, like we've seen Jalen Duren dominate as a rebounder, but I think as we see more defensive rebounds rack up, I think that's only a good thing as well. So I think there are areas where you can really track it, but to your point, I'm interested to see not only day one, how is he looking on the defensive side of the ball, but is that something that can be sustained more consistently as the season goes on.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that answers it really well, and that consistency is big because with any young player, that's really what you ask for is that consistency. But we're transitioning now. Again, I made sure to mention year three as an important part of that question. Of yes, is he still young? Absolutely, absolutely. But I always think year three is a corner turning for a lot of players for the good or for the bad, right? And I
Mhm.
would hope certainly there's a corner turning for the good with Jalen Duren. Not that he's had a bad first 2 years, but again, we have things that we want to improve upon. And that's why I asked the question. So,
Yeah, I would say year 3, I don't think it's as declarative as it used to be just because we are seeing players come in younger and younger, but I would say by year 3, you have a really good sense of who a player is and what their trajectory is. Like,
Yep.
I think especially by year 3, you could tell if a player's a star or not, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's pretty apparent. So, with Jalen Duren, the flashes are certainly there. The athleticism jumps off the page. The potential, it is all right in front of him. It's just whether he does it every single night. I mean, we've seen Malachi Flynn and Sadiq Bey have 50-point games. They're like just about any player in the league can have a night that is, where they pop off. The real ones that are special aren't the ones that can just get 50 a night here and there and then just get 2 the next game. It's the guys who can go out and get 20 and 30 every single night or hold a team to 30 or 40% by the rim every single night. A guy who can get 10 rebounds every single night instead of 15 or 20 once in a blue moon, right? Like that's really what greatness is. Like LeBron James, does he go out and get 50 points every single night? No. But you can count on 25 plus, almost 10
Yeah.
assists, and 5 rebounds. Like, you can count on that.
And if you look at LeBron's career in the scoring category, I mean, he's only had a handful of 50-point games, and I think he's only had one 60-point game in over 20 years now. So
Yep. Yep. Like, there's just and so not saying he's LeBron James, but you just want to see that consistency. And again, a real big thing on the defensive side of the ball is just the availability. But again, what will make this team better is the fact of instead of having to rely on a James Wiseman as your big coming out of that rotation, you have guys like Isaiah Stewart who can fill in that role. You have guys like Paul Reed that can fill that role. Now, Troy, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, and I feel like this is kind of cheating. So I'll add in another question. But we talked about, is this the roster, going into training camp? I'll raise that further and go, is this the roster at the end of the season? I'm going to wager no. Most NBA rosters at least see some form of change as the season goes on, and I think especially with Trajan Langdon being in his first year, being in this new position and really being having control and say of the roster, I imagine, especially once we reach the 30, the 40 game mark of the season, I imagine that Trajan Langdon will have some opinions and some perspectives on where the roster can improve. So to me, I think that the earliest, most realistic date that we could see a trade, a significant trade, is somewhere in December. Most times people wait until after New Year because of the holidays, Christmas, all that type of stuff. So realistically, I wouldn't be shocked if we saw something around New Year where this team made some form of change. And that's regardless of if they're doing well or if they're not doing well. What are your thoughts?
yeah, I might even stretch it further and say deadline. I just think that this
Deadline's
is
the most likely. I'm just
right,
saying New Year's
right.
is like the earliest it could start, in my opinion.
Sure, sure, yeah. Yeah, I guess as far as if you're speaking earliest, sure, but I would probably say more realistic deadline,
Mhm.
just because that's kind of what we've been seeing across the league the past couple of seasons is that deadline. That deadline was always fun as a kid, right? 10 years ago, 15 years ago watching, but my goodness, it seems like the deadline is even exploded in the past couple of years of the bigger trades, the Kevin Durant's, the James Harden a couple years ago. Remember from Brooklyn to Philly. I
Right.
mean, it just seems like there's just bigger moves, but it also seems like a lot of teams participate. Even some teams that don't actually make blockbuster trades, they'll either make little trades or they'll flirt around and see what certain players available, or they'll look at their own roster. So I think we're in a season where at least all 30 teams are participating, even if they don't all pull the trigger. So I think with this Pistons team, I could see there being some triggers being pulled around the deadline. I'll just say that.
I mean, we've alluded to it multiple times with, with the contract situations of the players on this roster. I mean, really the only players that are committed to as of right now beyond next season are Cade Cunningham and Isaiah Stewart. So you look at the rest of the roster. You know, there are very tradable, very movable contracts. And I think why you're seeing so much more of that movement around the league, Troy, obviously player empowerment is a big piece of it. The players being able to have a say over where they go. But I also think it's, again, not to beat a dead horse, but it's those new salary, implications. It's the new apron systems because if I am a team that's in the middle, there already wasn't much of an incentive to tank and be mid. But now if I'm, getting close to one of these aprons and we suck, what's the incentive? And so, I think for the Pistons, I mean, you saw it already in free agency. Guys go to situations for contracts that just straight up are not really what they're actually worth. Like Malik Beasley, no world where he should actually just be getting a 1 year, $6 million contract. The Pistons benefit because of the salary cap, because there's no longer that leverage, right? So I'm just interested to see what players could potentially be in that discussion because I could see it go both ways, Troy. Of I wouldn't be surprised if they went out and were like, okay, this team's ready to get a more proven veteran star around them. Let's go get, say, a Brandon Ingram. I'm not saying that's who they would go get. I'm just using him as an example. Or I could also see them say, all right, we got some solid young pieces. Everything looks good. I think I know what we need to do next year. Let me sell some pieces off and get some extra assets. I could see that happen as well. Trajan Langdon, to me, the vibes, just everything I've gotten from him is there's not just one plan. There are multiple doors. It is all, it is all consistent with the same goal and the same vision, but he's not married to a particular plan or status quo.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy there and some good insight. Yeah, you're right, Sean. Everything in the league changes with these contracts, and I guess I'm here for it. We've talked about the collective bargaining agreement before, right, and how that
Mhm.
plays a big piece into this, and I think it gives more power to teams like us.
Yep.
So I guess I'm here for it, but you're right. There becomes a strategy that GMs have to figure out and have in order to put a successful team that we didn't necessarily see that strategy in this full capacity in years prior. So
Yeah, absolutely. My final question, I suppose, about this or this burning question heading into training camp is this still a bottom 3 roster? Like, will they finally be able to get out of the depths of the NBA, abyss this season that is the bottom of the Eastern Conference? I look at other teams, you know, throughout the league, and especially with Cooper Flag coming into play, it just feels like this is a real transition year for a lot of teams. Specifically, I think the Brooklyn Nets have a chance to also be historically bad. I think the Charlotte Hornets are a team that could take a jump, but also take a dump. The Chicago Bulls, I think, are also going to be bad. The Toronto Raptors, I'm just going to go out on a limb, are going to be bad. The Atlanta Hawks, if they are good, it will have nothing to do with Zachary Risachet, and I will put my life savings on that, which is nothing. But Troy, my question is, will this be the year that they are out of that bottom 3? I think there's a real chance.
there's a chance. I think it's the highest chance, at least in the last 3 years,
I
four
didn't even
years.
mention the Wizards, by the way.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, and if I guess you put all those teams, where do you land? We did a podcast a couple of weeks ago, ranking all of that. I could easily see this team being an 11th seed, and that would put you above, the bottom three, right? Obviously, that's how
Mhm.
math works. So yeah,
Math, we do it good.
in that regard, in that question, 11. But I would think their ceiling still is 10.
Right.
So
Right, of course. Yeah. The ceiling, I think it goes without saying that they're probably not gonna be one of the top 8 seeds in the Eastern Conference, especially, when you talk about the growth of teams, it's mostly more, it's most times it's a lot more organic. It doesn't just happen very sudden. You incrementally improve each and every year. But when looking at this roster and thinking about the fact that, these young players are now really starting to mature. And you would think after last year, you'd want to have a completely different result. Not saying that this team's going to suddenly magically fix all of the problems that they have, but as the season goes on, there would be an expectation that they would have a much better chance of putting a competitive product on the court. And really, that's what matters most.
It does, because we haven't seen it in a while. So
Yep, absolutely. So, with that, Troy, before we wrap up, I would be interested to just talk about a couple of interesting stories from around the league since we've last recorded. The first
yeah,
one is kind of a little bit of a unique one. It's actually not about a player, but rather about a reporter. Well,
yeah,
out of nowhere, Adrian Wojnarowski, the Woj bomb dropper himself, has announced his retirement from media and has accepted the position as the general manager of St. Bonaventure men's basketball. St. Bonaventure being Adrian Wojnarowski's alma mater. People are asking, what in the world does a general manager for a college basketball team even look like? Well, essentially, he's going to handle NIL deals and recruiting. It's so much work now that coaches don't even have the time to do it. So now colleges are going to be hiring general managers for all sorts of different sports. Woj is just doing it for his alma mater. So on a less serious note, because we don't really talk about college basketball, I feel like Woj could actually bring that program to prominence. And I'm actually kind of excited to see what he does. And we'll kind of follow that, just intriguingly side eyeing St. Bonaventure basketball in a way I never thought I would. But Troy, Woj is one of the greatest reporters, in my opinion, not just in sports history, but like to ever grace journalism. Like, this is a guy that you just talk about the information that he's been able to get, the news that he's broken. And I truly like there's only like a handful of reporters that you say, if this guy says it, it is truth. And to me, I always said, if it's from Woj, I trust it. What was your reaction when you saw the news, Troy? Is your mic on?
yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, my news was certainly sad because of an end of an era, right? Anything that's worth
Mhm.
value and that has greatness that comes to a close is certainly a sad thing in all categories of life. But I think with Woj, what's great is you're right. The media information that he was able to communicate with the fans. I follow a couple of Twitter threads that had all 30 NBA teams' biggest Woj bomb.
Yep.
And there were some great memories that were popping up for the Pistons. It was, of course, the Blake Griffin trade in February of 2018.
Yep.
I think all Pistons fans remember what they were doing when they got that Woj bomb, right?
Yep.
And I just think, my goodness, like you said, if you heard it from Woj, you knew it was true. And his ability to communicate with, again, fan base on draft night, what teams are thinking, where teams are leaning, where GM's headspace are, how you have the second pick. Are you picking Scoot Henderson? Or are you picking Brandon Miller? Right, those
Yep.
types of questions that us NBA fans are dying to know. He's able to communicate that in such a great way to the fan base. And when you look at a growing league like the NBA, you want and you need a guy like Woj to do that. And I guess is this the Shams era now?
Yeah.
We'll have
This
to see how that works.
I made the joke that Shams being the last one standing, this feels like the universe where Drake won the beef between Drake and Kendrick. It feels like that's what's happening in the NBA world. But
Sure.
in all seriousness, with Woj, the thing that made him so incredible, like obviously those massive stories
Yeah.
and his ability to be the first to get them is just simply unprecedented. But the thing that's truly special about Woj is the level of detail that he was able to get, which with each of these reports. I was listening to the Zach Lowe podcast, and he was recounting a column that Woj did detailing, just the tension between the Bulls front office and Tom Thibodeau when he was the coach at the time. And
Right.
in that column, like one little nugget that you could have totally missed was Tom Thibodeau would play music in his office at times when talking to coaches because he was paranoid that they were spying on him and bugged his office.
Wow.
Like
Wow. I guess
like
I didn't hear that
to
story.
like to be able to get that level of detail. And Troy, let me just tell you the amount of relationships you have to build for someone to be comfortable enough to confide that information in you is massive. And the fact that Woj was able to do that all the time with players throughout the league, whether they're, stars like Damian Lillard or G League players, this guy has access and knowledge, and just the way that he did it was, I just don't think really outside of guys like Shams, Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, like other guys throughout the sports world. I just don't think we're going to see many guys like that again.
No, we're not. We're not, and that's why again I mentioned end of an era. Again, when
Yep.
you are as great at any profession as Woj was with his reporting, you're gonna miss that. You're gonna miss that from a league that is so big and growing, and so many moving parts with players and coaches and GMs like the NBA is.
Yep. Absolutely. Troy, another story I think is worthy of us discussing. Earlier in the week, Joel Embiid announced that he is signing a contract extension with the Philadelphia
Yeah,
76ers.
that's right.
Specifically, he is signing a 3-year, $193 million contract extension with a player option in the year 2028, 2029. So now Joel Embiid, who is entering into his 30s, which, by the way, the 76ers didn't necessarily even have to extend him either. Like, he wasn't necessarily, like, up yet for being extended. His contract is currently through 2025, 2026. So, to me, the fact that they did it this soon, obviously, it brings, a great level of confidence because it's like, "Hey, don't worry, we locked down our star." But Troy, seeing that this is a guy who's only played 60 plus games and 50% of his career, now going over the age of 30, I have my concerns.
Yeah, I got two things for you. Uh, my goodness, the Philadelphia 76ers are locked up. And my second thing is, my goodness, Joel Embiid better stay healthy. And
Mhm.
I think the two kind of go hand in hand there. But yeah, I have my doubts too, because this is a guy that has been pretty brittle with injuries like all of his
Mhm.
career. Uh,
Well, and let's be
and
honest too,
yeah,
like, how many injuries do you think could have been avoided if he wasn't just pushing himself to try to win MVP? I don't I think you could make an argument that this is, like, one of the most individual achievement obsessed stars we've seen since Wilt Chamberlain.
yeah, I think that would be a fair assessment, Sean.
And honestly, I just think the more I learn about Joel Embiid, and if you read up on Wilt Chamberlain, by the way, they are so similar, just in their personality and their ego and their demeanor, and they're two of the most talented big men and just players to ever play the game as a whole. It just makes you wonder why they're not considered all time great. It's that little stuff. It really is.
Yeah, well, how many times have you said, in looking at greatness and looking at Hall of Fame talent, it's the little things, right? Or Isaiah
Yep.
Thomas's quote of it has nothing to do with basketball, right? Those little leaps, we've even talked about too. We look at the grand scheme of the NBA as a whole, looking at all 400 players. You mentioned that earlier. You have a guy like a Malachi Flynn, who at any time in any given moment can score 50 points because he truly is a top 400 player in the world. Malachi Flynn. But you also have guys like Luca, who are a top 5 player in the world, which
Yep.
that top player in the world, top 5 versus top 400. What there is obviously noticeable difference, but those noticeable differences are actually, in the grand scheme of things, very little things, from the 392nd best player in the world to the second best player in the world.
Yep.
Big differences, but those differences, as far as what separates them, are the
Yep.
little things.
Yep. And especially and then when you get into the all-time greats, you start getting into their resume, you start getting
Yeah.
into their statistics, you go over percentages. You are literally splitting hairs. And I think when you talk about something that will pretty easily disqualify Joel Embiid from those discussions is his lack of playoff production. I mean, until he gets past the second round, he could win MVP every year for the rest of his career. And we go, wow, that's a great talent. Why couldn't he get it done in the playoffs?
Yeah. Right. Those
And
questions become even more prominent.
Mhm. And, when you talk about, having the opportunity and being in the position to do so, this is probably as good of a time as they're ever going to have. Yet again, feels like we said that every single year. And, if I'm being honest, I don't have a lot of evidence to really bet on Paul George either.
Right, right. Which is kind of why I tried to argue a little bit that they weren't quite yet, um, going to be the top of the East at least when we did our tier brackets. But
I would
of
I would
course,
agree with that. I would agree with that. However, I just think when you're talking about, what the expectations are, where these teams should be, the expectation is this is who this team has to be for this season, even to
has to be. You're right,
yeah.
for their own sake. For their own sake. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
And I also think I also try to give a little bit more of a benefit of the doubt because I know I'm biased against the 76ers. So I try to check my bias at the door a little bit.
Sure,
You know what I'm
sure. Yeah,
saying?
I know what you're saying.
Now, another story that actually just broke about an hour ago. Just in from Shams Charania, Derrick Rose has been
Yeah,
waived by the
yeah.
Memphis Grizzlies. So, right before training camp, Derrick Rose will now be a free agent. It is not clear if he's looking to play this year. I would imagine if he was still on the roster this close to training camp, he is. And we still don't quite know the full reasons as to why he was waived. But Troy, assuming that Derrick Rose plays again next season, where would you like to see him go? And why is it back to New York?
It's back to New York because of the Knicks' talent this season. I think they're going to be pushing hard for the Eastern Conference Finals and even the Finals. And
Yep.
if you're a fan of the NBA, that means you're a fan of Derrick Rose. And I think everyone in the league wants him to win and to be in the category of potentially winning. But I mean, you can make arguments anywhere else. I mean, you could easily make a homegoing argument for Chicago. That would be unfair to him as far as trying to win in
Yep.
this stage of Chicago's rebuild. I mean, you can make an argument for a Milwaukee. You can make an argument for a Boston, right? I mean, just because they're naturally the talented teams
Mhm.
in the league. If you want to go on the West Coast, I guess you could make an argument for Denver or a Minnesota reunion. Of
Mhm.
course, with me living in Indy, I wouldn't mind him being a mentor in his last year to Tyrese Halliburton here. I don't know if that's probable, probably not, but it would
No.
be fun to see. It would certainly be fun to see. But yeah, I think if you're a fan of the NBA, you're a Derrick Rose fan, and I just think if this truly is his last season, the New York Knicks do make sense. So
Yeah, he's had multiple stints there where, he's actually played pretty well in his
yeah,
time with
oh,
the Knicks.
absolutely, both stats, both
And
stats.
he's a player that is, you talk about, the Tom Thibodeau system, the players, that have flourished in that. He's perhaps the one who's flourished the most within the Tibbs system. So even if Derrick Rose isn't a part of the active rotation, if he's someone that you bring in as just another veteran, another solid guy in the locker room, he's a great guy to have, but we also know about Derrick Rose. You talk about a guy, a veteran who can still give you 5 minutes of magic, once in a
Yeah,
blue moon, like a guy who
it's
can
him.
still go out and give you those flashes of brilliance. That's Derrick Rose. I
It
mean,
is. It's him.
he can't be prime Derrick Rose for 30 to 40 minutes anymore, but he can give you about 5 to 10 minutes of 80 to 90% Derrick Rose, which is still athletic than most of the guards that have ever played this game. So,
That's right.
if he's able to, prove that and still get those opportunities, I think that would be awesome if, that is a potential, landing spot for him, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. You brought up Chicago. That would obviously be great if he wanted to finish his career there. That would be an awesome opportunity. But I just really think that, when you think of like, all right, what is the best fit? How can we get this guy a ring? The Knicks just make the most sense. Plus, our guy James Edwards III is there now. So,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
it'd be
just
fun
another
to
reason.
yeah, it'd be fun to report on him during a final season.
Yep.
So
Yep. Absolutely. Well, Troy, we are not very far at all from
no, one
NBA basketball.
one
And
month, my
until
friend.
Yep. And we got WNBA playoff hoops to
Yeah,
hold us down until then. So,
we do, and hey, again, like I've said before, in my opinion, the season doesn't start with opening night. Season starts with preseason. So we got preseason first here in a couple of weeks, so that's going to
yep.
be fun to watch.
Yep. Absolutely, and for me, it starts with training camp, man, so I'm excited, but thank you all to those who listen and support the show. If you like what we do here, be sure you like the video down below and subscribe for more episodes. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you subscribe.